Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to the Kelly's Astrology podcast. You might have noticed I had an unexpected break and I haven't dropped an episode for the past couple of weeks. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in today's show. And funnily enough, themes of dealing with the unexpected are definitely going to be what we're talking about as I share some tips and insights to do with this upcoming full moon in Leo. That'll be happening on February 12th. February 13th, depending on where you are. Now, you might be wondering why this dramatic full moon will come with a side of chaos or upheaval, and that's thanks to the planet Uranus, who is making a strong square aspect to the full moon. So more on all of that in a few minutes. Before I get into all of these astro updates and of course catch up with you a little bit, I do need to mention that right now I have a special anniversary sale happening on my membership. So if you'd like to join my private community, if you'd like to get access to exclusive daily and weekly astrology tips and timing info, now's the time to save 20% on the annual fee, or you can enjoy a free month if you sign up before the 10th of February. If you want to find out more or get immediate instant access when you register, you can do so on the link which I'll share in the show notes below. Inside the membership, there are weekly videos, there's insights on timing, worksheets to help you work with the planets. By joining the membership, you will deepen your understanding of how astrology works, and you'll find that divine celestial insight to help you manage your energy. These membership videos are shared monthly in advance, so you never miss the insights that you need. So find out more via the link in the show notes below. So with that message shared, let's catch up for a minute before we dive into the astrology. First off, I do want to apologize for just kind of vanishing and dropping off without a word. I had a suspicion that I might miss 1 week of the podcast around my annual Palm Springs retreat, but it turned out that I ended up missing more than that. And the worst was that I hadn't let you know in advance. So I really appreciate that can be a little unsettling, and it's not how I typically like to roll, so I do apologize for that. I really just didn't do enough forward planning, knowing that I had the retreat coming up. And so while I had that going on, plus another trip, I just wasn't able to keep up with the podcast. I do love connecting with you all here each week, and I don't plan to keep missing weeks, certainly not without letting you know in advance, if I'm taking a holiday here or there. That said, I can imagine that many of you would know what it's like to at times find yourself a little overscheduled and having to make some tough calls about what to drop and what to focus on, which was exactly where I found myself towards the end of January. One thing I've been working on personally as I've been moving through my 40s has been to try and rest when I've really needed to recharge. And so opting for that a little more than I planned over the last couple of weeks meant that I could really focus my best energy on my teaching commitments, my retreat students, as well as my online students. Shout out to everyone in my astrology training program. It also meant I could keep up with my membership commitments, but unfortunately, it meant that I wasn't able to be here on the podcast as usual. That said, I'm settled back in at home now, and I will be staying put for a little while. So I'm really excited to get back into our regular weekly connections here on the podcast. So in that spirit, let's take a look at this fiery full moon in Leo coming on February 12th. The full moon will be at 24 degrees of Leo, for those of you who like the details, and it is on February 12th in most locations, unless you're in Australia or other parts of the Pacific, where the full moon will arrive on February 13. For most of us, from a visual or an experiential perspective, the nights of February 12th and February 13, the moon is going to look big, bright, and bold. I did mention that Uranus will square the full moon, and that's from Uranus's place at 23 Taurus. So the Uranus at 23 Taurus and the full moon at 24 Leo, that categorizes that as one of those dynamic square aspects. There is another planet worth mentioning, which I will come back to towards the end of the show today, and that is Mercury. So at the time of the full moon, Mercury is tucked right beside the sun at 26 Aquarius. So remembering that if the full moon's at 24 Leo, that means that the sun is at 24 Aquarius, and Mercury at 26 Aquarius is right by the sun. So first things first, let's start with the element that the full moon is in. So the full moon is in a fire sign. Of course, Leo is one of our fire signs. It's our most dramatic fire sign. And that means that it is going to be a full moon about action, about movement, about drama, and probably about some revelations. The full moon in Leo highlights leaders and people in positions of power. So they're going to be in the spotlight. Remember that Leo is a sign of royalty and really indicates those in figurehead or leadership or authority positions. At a personal level, you might be full of fire under this full moon. That could mean that you are ready for action, that you are motivated to take charge. Or it could mean that you're fired up and that you're angry or that you're really passionate or impassioned about something that you care strongly about. A full moon in a fire sign is going to bring lots of energy forward. So make sure you have a plan about what you're going to do to burn through or to use up this heat. Fire and this kind of active heat quality, it needs expression. We need projects to channel that energy into. We need physical activity to move that energy through our bodies. And having a bit of a plan about what you're going to do with this energy or, what actions you might want to take, it will help you be productive through this full moon rather than just like erratic and bouncing around or just feeling mad the whole time. A fire full moon, so a full moon in a fire sign, is definitely about action and activity. So we want to try and be intentional with the actions we're taking rather than just sort of feel reactive with the actions we're taking. So that's about the fire element. Let's talk now about the planet Uranus, who is really the strongest planetary signature coming through for the full moon. And of course, Uranus is the wildcard planet. This is the planet of rebellion, of freedom, of change, and of liberation. Sudden shifts and major reorganizations of systems, of structures, of your schedule are definitely possible when Uranus becomes active. So in your own life, if this full moon at 24 degrees of Leo is activating important planets or points in your chart, you'll feel this particularly strongly. Of course, though, a collective event like a full moon can certainly show these qualities emanating out into society in shared or communal collective ways. So if we're trying to really get a handle on the planet Uranus, the myth that best aligns with the qualities associated with Uranus in astrology is actually that of Prometheus, a Titan. And I want to share a short passage from a fantastic little book. This book is called Prometheus the Awakener by Richard Taurus. And many of you will know that name, Richard Taurus. Richard Taurus wrote a very comprehensive book looking at astrological cycles throughout history. That book is called Cosmos and Psyche, and it is a big kind of deep book. Prometheus the Awakener is a skinny little fast read. It's kind of the complete opposite, but it really gives an excellent kind of deep and rich profile on how we use Uranus astrologically and connects the qualities of the myth of Prometheus to the way we think about Uranus in astrology. So I can't say enough good things about this particular book, especially if you want to get a better handle on Uranus in your astrological work. So let me read this little section. So the figure Prometheus was a Titan who rebelled against the gods, who helped overthrow the tyrannical Kronos, who tricked Zeus, who stole fire from Mount Olympus to liberate humanity from the gods' power. Prometheus was considered the wisest of his race and taught humankind all the arts and sciences. When we talk about Prometheus's fire, I want to just share a little section about what Taurus describes that to mean. So Prometheus is fire. So Prometheus steals fire from the gods because they've been hoarding it and shares it with the masses, gives it to humanity. So Prometheus's fire conveyed at once several meanings: the creative spark, cultural and technological breakthrough, the enhancement of human autonomy, the liberating gift from the heavens, sudden enlightenment, intellectual and spiritual awakening. And so the idea when we have Uranus active is that we get a lot of those Promethean qualities and possibilities coming forward. The idea of taking something that has been kept by a few and sharing it with the many for the benefit of all is a really core part of the Prometheus myth, and it's really woven into how we use Uranus in astrology. So that idea of the bright spark has always, taking the fire from the heavens and sharing it with everybody. That idea is really alive and well, or that myth or that motif is coming forward very strongly under this full moon that is square Uranus. So at a personal level, this might mean that you have a breakthrough or that sudden realization, as if you've had this gift of heavenly insight. And that might shift your perspective. It might help you with that breakthrough that changes the way you're going to move forward. It might mean that you can clear a path or overcome what was an obstacle. But now that you've had this insight or realization, you're like, that obstacle isn't there anymore, or I know how to get around it. So Uranus can really help with overcoming fear and helping activate authenticity. In some ways, it can kind of help with that divine insight or wisdom that becomes your motivating ideal or inspiration. Now, Uranus is a planet that is very much about going forward to a new kind of future. And it really encourages those ideals of change to help us innovate new pathways, new structures, new agreements, new ways of being. And what Uranus also does is it kind of encourages the challenge to the status quo, or the questioning, why are we doing things this way? How could we do it differently? So when we have this strong Uranus signature come in astrology, there's a lot of curiosity about new options and new possibilities rather than doing things the way they've always been done. Now, while this idea of a fresh new way forward for the future can be very exciting, it can take time to permeate, especially if you're trying to get other people on board with these new ideas that you're excited about. It can also be initially a little unsettling to think we're going to do things differently. Even if you agree with the idea of like that guiding principle of, yes, this would be a much better way to do it, it does mean you're going to have to stop doing things in a way that is familiar or comfortable. And that's where I think sometimes as humans, we get a little bit stuck with Uranus. We do want to embrace the unfamiliar. We want to kind of get comfortable or find a way to be okay with things being unfamiliar or unknown as part of this transition. So personally, you might decide to really, embrace the new or challenge the status quo around the topics of the Leo house in your birth chart, which is where this full moon is happening, or around the topics of any planets that you might have at these 23 or 24 degrees of the fixed signs, which are directly getting this full moon and this Uranus activation. So 23 or 24 degrees of Taurus, of Leo, of Scorpio, or Aquarius are all very strongly activated by this full moon square Uranus. So there are two other quick points to mention on this full moon. We've looked at the element of fire, we've looked at the influence of Uranus, and now I want to mention that the full moon in Leo is ruled by the sun, of course. And at the time of the full moon, the sun is in Aquarius, which is the sign of the sun's detriment. So the short piece here is the full moon is ruled by a planet in detriment. And that adds a wobbly or an unstable or an inconsistent quality into the full moon mix. It means that you might have to get a little bit scrappy or a little bit creative or a little bit inventive to figure out how to move forward when you don't have the perfect supports or resources available. Because the ruler of the full moon is a planet in detriment, you might have to explore a new way, you might have to innovate, or you might have to take a detour. It may not be as straightforward as you hoped. And so the idea with this full moon ruler being a planet in detriment, we are getting creative, we're thinking outside the box, we are doing things differently, and some of those qualities are already qualities associated with Uranus. And that sort of leads me to this understanding there's sort of this repetition of theme at this full moon. It's square Uranus and it's ruled by an out-of-the-box planet in detriment. It brings to mind that proverb that you may be familiar with, that necessity is the mother of invention. And it's the idea that when things are less than ideal, you really have to get creative and think outside the box so that you can adapt what you have to the circumstances at hand. The way you approach what's coming up for you right now may not be the way you thought you'd approach it. It may not be the way you think you should approach it. It may not be the way you've approached it in the past. And that's the point of this sort of inventive, let's try it a brand new way, breaking new ground, so to speak. So it's probably no surprise to you that given the full moon is square Uranus, it comes with flux and change. That is definitely all about Uranus. We've got that shaking the foundations energy, and we're ready to really shift established patterns and habits. But when we add in that the ruler of the full moon is in detriment as well, that also contributes to this kind of inconsistent, wobbly vibe. So my tip to pull all of that together is to really stay flexible this week. You're going to be spontaneous. People around you are going to be spontaneous because plans, possibilities, and schedules, even the things that you want, the ideas that are inspiring and guiding you, everything is up in the air. So there is a lot of possibility to shake things up, to do things differently, to maybe express ideas or interests from a part of you that you normally keep hidden or that you normally don't want to show because it might be too different or too unconventional or too out of the ordinary. This is a week to bring all of that energy forward. Finally, I do want to touch on Mercury, who I mentioned close to the top of the show, is tucked right beside the sun. And that puts Mercury technically in a combust condition where it's hidden by its proximity to the sun at the time of the full moon. And a planet like Mercury, when it's combust, really highlights secrets and mysteries and things that are obscured. It's a clue that divine wisdom might have insights to offer, because when a planet like Mercury is so close to the sun, it's sort of pulling in that divine or higher knowledge. It also is a clue that you might be working on something, but you still want to keep it private or to yourself for now. And it does tell us that there is a hidden undertone to this full moon, and that some of what is currently obscured may not come to light until Mercury emerges from under the beams of the sun, which happens towards the end of the month. So the period from February 24th to 28 could be notable where things that are hidden or obscured right now emerge into the light. So hidden plans or documents or information that maybe it's been missing or it's been intentionally kept private, things are coming out in the open. And so this full moon has a lot of layers, some of which are kind of in your face right now this week. And there's a few kind of little hidden pieces to this full moon that we won't get a good handle on until the last week of February. So that's a lot of pieces to do just with this one astro event, this full moon in Leo, square Uranus, also acknowledging Mercury is in that combust or hidden condition. I wanted to kind of just share a little bit of a personal Uranus experience as we get to the end of the show today. So that's what I'm going to do now. That many years ago, I personally went through this extended period where I had Uranus transit after Uranus transit after Uranus transit, just hitting key points and places in my chart. And I went through a huge amount of change in a really short space of time. And I felt, it just felt so much so quickly that I felt upside down and back to front. And there was a quote that I went back to almost every day during that period that I drew on for inspiration that really helped guide me through that exciting but very tumultuous period. Now, I've since found out that this quote is actually the title of a book I didn't know that at the time. I just thought it was a quote, and that's what I kind of ruminated on. So the quote was this one: when everything changes, change everything. Short, simple, deep, profound, and I found it so thought-provoking. At the time, I had moved from Australia to Canada, and the cars were on the other side of the road. I had to figure out that I paid the bills at the bank instead of the post office. And this was so long ago, it was before online bill payments. And the food was really different. It took me quite some time to find my feet in what felt like a very strange and unfamiliar environment. And that include having to dress in a totally different way because it was much colder where I was living in Canada than where I had lived in Australia. So everything from getting dressed in the morning to crossing the road throughout the day, I had to learn to do it in a different way. But I did. Slowly but surely, I found my way. I figured one thing out, and then the next week, I figured something else out. And so I kind of offer that to you because I do have this sense that no matter how much upheaval or drama this full moon in Leo square to Uranus might bring, that you too, like me, will find ways to bring your essence and your light into whatever set of new circumstances you might find yourself. After all, this is a full moon in Leo, which is a sign of finding and expressing your inner light. So I'd love to hear how you're exploring some of these themes: freedom, authenticity, change, upheaval, innovation amidst these wild skies. Let me know what you're ready to shake up in your life in the comments below. If you would like to join us inside the membership, you can save 20% if you register by February 10, or you can have a free month if you go for the monthly option. So I wish you all a wonderful week. I know it's going to be exciting. It'll definitely have a few surprises, but I will be back to touch base with you and look forward to hearing your experiences in the comments below. Talk to you all next week. Bye for now.